Okay, I think we'll kick off. I'm sure some more people will join us as we go along. We were just chatting between ourselves about the storms that we're having here in the Midlands, and my internet completely went about half an hour ago. So we're hoping and praying, fingers crossed, that we make it through this evening. So hello and welcome to the June edition of Tech Wednesday. It feels like we've been gone for quite some time. As those of you who joined us last month know, we had a Tech Nation takeover, so we were on a completely different platform. So it feels like we've been gone forever, but if you want to look back at that, then you can do. Thank you, Naomi, for obviously letting us be a part of that last month, and you can watch that on the Tech Nation website. So, quick overview of Tech Wednesday. So if you are joining us for the very first time, thank you ever so much. It's great to have you with us. And if you're a returning attendee, again, it's great to have you with us. And thanks for sticking with us through this lockdown. Who knows when we're going to get back into real life events, but hopefully it won't be too much further into the future. So Tech Wednesday is our monthly meetup. We hold it the third Wednesday of every month. It does say on the slide there it's for the Midlands tech and entrepreneurial community, but the lovely thing about this virtual world is that we can open it up. So I do hope we have some people from further across the UK. You'll find out from one of our speakers as well, who will be joining us this evening. He is dialing in from up north. So the hashtag just on there on your screen, hashtag TechWeds, please do use this throughout the session. And again, at the end of the session, it helps us to kind of keep everything in one place when we're all talking about the same things. It's really great for the speakers to be able to connect with people after the event, and they can just use that hashtag to find you, which is really, really useful. So talking of speakers, we've got two fantastic speakers this evening. So we've got Clive Bawden, who's the founder of Board Secure, and Brayshay, who is the co-founder of NewRedo software, which is quite a mouthful. When I was practicing earlier, I stumbled all over it, so got through it well. This evening, we're going to follow the agenda which we usually do. So if you're not familiar with Tech Wednesday, this is how we're going to run it. So shortly, I will hand over to Clive, who is our first speaker. He's going to do a 10 minutes or so presentation. I'm sure we're going to maybe get a little bit more from him, but his talks there are going to talk about the 5 things about being a director that early stage growth company founders need to know. Really fantastic. Then after Clive's talk, we're going to open up for a Q&A with him. So please do get your questions ready. Then we'll hear from Royd, as I say. He's going to be talking about making distributed teams work for the long haul. And again, we'll open up for a Q&A then. I have just popped at the bottom there. Please don't wait for the Q&A sessions to submit your questions. As soon as they come into your mind, pop them in the Q&A tab or the chat, and we'll have those there ready for when we come to the Q&A session. And then we've just got a few opportunities and events to talk about very, very briefly, a couple of minutes each, and before we round up for the evening. Hopefully we'll stay on track. We're looking for a 6:30 finish, but we'll keep going. I'm not going to whip it too hard, or there's not going to be a countdown timer before we start going. So what I will do then, I will hand straight over to Clive, before I take up too much of your time. A quick bio on Clive. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with Clive. He's a familiar face amongst the Innovation Birmingham community and a regular face at our Tech Wednesday meetups. So Clive is the founder of Board Secure, which is an angel-funded digital platform focused on directors of fast-growth businesses and their boards. And as I mentioned previously, tonight he's going to cover about being a director of early stage growth and, as I say, much, much more. So Clive, if I invite you to share your screen and a round of applause.
Thank you, Steph. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Can you hear me at your end, Steph?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so the challenge set by Steph was 10 minutes. We joked about 12. Let's see how close we can get to 10. So I'm going to talk very simply about 5 things I believe directors of early stage companies need to know. And as the opening slide says there, my business is Board Secure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the deck. So probably 5:30 on a Wednesday evening with the villa kicking off shortly, you're probably thinking governance, bit dull, bit boring, etc. And as an early stage founder, when you've got sales, marketing, tech, people, all these important things to worry about, then yeah, on occasion, even I as a chartered accountant can say it can sound a bit dull, it can sound a bit boring. And let's face it, we've always got an advisor, a friend or a mentor that we can ask advice from as well. However, I would urge caution and urge a little bit of understanding, hence the reason for suggesting to Steph that we look at this subject, because I think it's something that early stage founders often get wrong, not through malevolence, not through stupidity, just simply by not seeing it as important until it becomes important. When it's such a fundamental part of the business, you know, we'll touch upon what that means in a minute, because governance ultimately underpins the direction, the effectiveness and the accountability of an organization. Basically, the thing you've signed up to run, governance is the word that covers how you run it, why you run it, and the accountability of it. And if you're an early stage founder with ambitions of, you know, getting to the FTSE or whatever your ambitions are, if you don't start early on thinking about how you manage this process, then my experience tells me that you may have some problems ahead. Getting it wrong can also cause you and your company real pain, can land you with fines, you know, without scaring people too much, you know, disqualifications, jail. They're not common, they really aren't common. But I do think a basic understanding is something you should look at. And again, one of the benefits of working through an accelerator, an incubator, or working with people like Bruntwood is that, you know, this is part of the knowledge share that you gain from a collaborative environment. The other key thing, particularly if you're looking at fundraising later on, is that knowing what you're there to do and showing your investors and your stakeholders that you're professional, you know how to be effective, you know what the basic role of a director is. I can't help thinking that can't be a bad thing, surely. You know, it's certainly when you're looking from an investment point of view, part of the early stage investment thought process is this team credible? Is this founder credible? And, you know, if you don't know what you're there to do, it can be a real problem. Let's move into this. So these are not the top 5. These are just 5 things that I've seen in my journey. I spent over 20 years working with high growth SMEs, running them, advising them, at times turning them around, mostly helping them find finance and people and growing. A lot of that's been distilled into why I founded Board Secure. But today I just thought I'd pick on 5 that I've seen commonly got wrong. And so the 5 slides you'll quickly see are 5 simple things. I'm going to give a brief description of what I mean by that. I'm happy to take Q&A at the end, or even have a chat afterwards if need to be. But how am I doing for time, Steph? Yes, not too bad. Right, good. Right, so part 1, read your articles. I think very few people do this. Most people form a company, get the company's house template. Thank you very much. We're off and running. We've got a company. And what are the articles, by the way, is usually a question you get further down the line. Why are they important? Why should you read them? Even if you formed a quick company off the web. Bottom line is these are the rules. You've set something up. It has a legal purpose, a legal you know, body outside of yours. You know, these are the rules of the game, the constitution of the company. They'll include restrictions, what you can and can't do as a director, who needs to agree what and by when, how you appoint new directors, record what they do. In other words, there's an awful lot of things there. And if you don't know the rule book, then in other words, that there are problems ahead potentially. They'll change if you get new shareholders on board. Almost certainly they'll change. The venture guys, the private equity guys, they may look at you and want to change the article significantly, but ultimately from day one, you should know the basics of the rule book. So that's tip one. If you need to find them or need help finding them, come back and have a chat afterwards. But that's the first things first. Know the rule book. Don't need to know clause 28.6.c, but just read the basics. Just have a brief idea of what they're there to do. Point two, phenomenally common mistake made by early stage, and it's it's often the way, as the founding shareholder and director, by default you're usually the first person in the party. Well, you have to be the first person in the party. You're starting things off, but very few people in my experience, particularly as things grow, really grasp the difference between being a shareholder and being a director, and they are fundamentally different things. They may often overlap. The Venn diagram, in the early days, is a complete overlap, and things change as the business grows. But ultimately, as a director, your role is to promote the long-term success of the company as a whole. It involves taking into account more than just the interests of the current shareholders. So why does that matter? It matters the moment you have somebody else involved. Somebody else is a shareholder, somebody else is a director. And a lot of the common issues you see within founding teams and founding teams that fall apart are they just don't understand the differences. Someone's not pulling their weight and they're a shareholder and director. There are two different considerations you need to think about there. So have a basic understanding of what the two differences are. And again, we'll signpost at the end some of the resources out there in terms of where you might look next. So part three. The word director is a very it's a very, very big word in many senses, and there's huge numbers of words and alternative words around, particularly in the tech world. Shadow directors, non-exec directors, executive chairman, advisors, advisory boards, you name it, the words blur into one. I guess there are so many parts to this that, again, I'd suggest a quick session after this, or happy to answer Q&A. Three things I'd draw particular attention to, though, is the distinction between director and non-exec. A lot of early stage bring in a non-exec chair or non-exec director. Key thing is in law, there is no distinction between the two. If you're a statutory director, you've signed up and you've become a statutory director, whether you're there 1 hour a week or whether you're there the entire working week, your distinction in law is no different. You're there to direct the company, its business. Secondly, a common fallacy, common mistake people make, you can be a director of a business but not listed at Companies House. And there's lots of different variants in this. How many regional directors of house building companies are there? Because it's a job title as opposed to a job role and a job specification. But there's lots of things around that people misunderstand. And also you can act as a director unintentionally. The word shadow is deliberate there. There's lots of early stage companies run by friends and family, and where advisors help make decisions without being one of the statutory directors. It's a common problem in early stage, and again, something I'd urge all founders to just have a basic idea of, because you can get yourself into big problems by having somebody outside of the statutory board running the board in the early stages if you're not careful. So nearly there. There are other obligations being a director. It's not just about the governance, not just about the G word. There are a number of other legislative things that you need to be cognizant of from early on. Employment, health and safety, insurance, tax, to name 4. There's a load of other obligations. None of them are scary. There's a huge panel of advisors. There's the IP guys. There's lots of really, really sound people around. Some of the startup hubs, Bruntwood being one within the West Midlands, and Royd, I'm sure, will talk about his network up in the north. But again, be aware that there's much more than just just focusing on the governance side. There's a much more to it. And then lastly, I've come across people who think that by resigning, they basically pass all responsibility, pass the buck, the job's done, and it's an easy way out. And the reality is, if you continue to exert influence over the board, resigning doesn't make any difference in that regard. Again, you end up becoming a shadow director. It doesn't allow you to walk away from problems that occurred while you're a director. There's a duty of care while you're there as a director for things that happen on your watch. The other thing, particularly if you're looking at a long-term career building businesses, is that reputation matters, and therefore looking at funders, the diligence funders put into early stage founders is quite remarkable at times. So be aware that, again, back to the premise, learn what you're there to do. Doesn't take 4 weeks worth of courses. Just have a basic understanding of the director role. So obviously there's a little sales plug. I've got a little SME diagnostic for anybody that's got a fast growth company that wants to just see where they sit. and obviously be remiss not to put that there, Steph, I hope you don't mind. I can be contacted at any of the appropriate social channels at the bottom, or over to you, Steph, but hopefully that's within time to a point. So that's me done.
Perfect. I mean, I wasn't timing, but I'd say you were probably 9 minutes 59. So just look in there. So thank you ever so much for that, Clive. I have just seen Kev popped in a little note there. So I'm just going to kick off with that, if you don't mind. So Kev's just asked, can you elaborate in short sentences the main difference you see between shareholders and directors, please?
Well, the most obvious is a director takes into account more than the interests of the current shareholders. So your job is to promote the long-term success of the company as a whole. So what does that mean? It means you may have stakeholders. So a bank is the most obvious, a creditor, you may owe money. And there are times where, particularly in the current climate, your duty is the long-term success of the company and not necessarily the shareholders. In other words, you may, and again, where this becomes particularly difficult, is you should be, if you're a founder, be a shareholder and a director, but you've got to recognise the difference in law between the company and yourself, and your role as a director and your role as a shareholder. So don't know if that summarises it quite quickly. Unfortunately, it is one of those torturous areas. You can spend days on this as a subject matter. The high level principles are actually relatively short. So.
Perfect. And hopefully, Kev, that's answered you. Oh, yeah, thank you. That link was a bit quick to copy. So can you share again? We'll share it again in a minute, if that's no problem. Another question has come in for you, Clive, from Naomi. So Naomi's asked, the steps take place at the start of building a business. If somebody is new to business, how do they learn this without spending a ton of money on a consultant?
So they don't need to spend a ton of money. So, I mean, step one, read the articles. Forming your company is remarkably, the UK's got one of the best frameworks in the world for setting a new company up. You can do it literally within minutes with a credit card, company's house, online, job done. And the articles, the standard articles given are a basic framework legal document that are the rules of your company. Now, there are some issues within that as to whether if you've often a lot more experienced second, third time founders will often go for bespoke articles from day one to incorporate the rules of the game they want from day one within their company. Frankly, though, that's often a legal cost that doesn't need to be done on day one. I mean, different views on this and pros and cons, but the early stage stuff, frankly, it's just part of things. Know what you're there to do, know what the rules are. The rules are actually fairly self-explanatory. It will tell you what you can and can't do. And the other beauty of early stage is that, and again, the beauties of an incubation climate, whether it's through TechNation, whether it's through Bruntwood or others, is that most early stage service providers, whether they're accountants, lawyers and the like, will give you a huge amount of free advice on these areas. It's usually only further down the line. Yeah, when dealing with a venture investment, this suddenly gets very real and very serious. And I'm not saying it isn't on day one, but actually there's a lot of stuff in the early days that actually is just common sense. But the biggest prod I'm hopefully giving people is at least read the documents, guys, because they're there. It is a rule book and you have signed up to it. I mean, theoretically, never has happened to my knowledge. On day two of a company, you could get disqualified as a director for breaching the rule book you signed up to on day one. Clearly, that's a little bit frivolous, but you signed up to a rule book, so at least know what it says. So,
perfect. Play by the rules. Another question come in. Do these change as your company grows? So presumably, do these 5 steps change or alter?
Certainly. I mean, the obvious ones are around directors. If you are, turning over, if you're raising investment from an institution, so a venture fund or a private equity fund, almost certainly they'll start putting their own directors on the board, whether that's a chair, whether that's a portfolio director or others. And therefore you start moving into a more managed boardroom environment with definitive roles and responsibilities. Company founder day one, you're doing everything, particularly if you're a founder of one. your job spec is do everything, and therefore, come back to Naomi's point, this is why this is something to be aware of and to be knowledgeable about, but it doesn't mean you have to be a subject domain expert on day two. This is just part of the learning toolkit. And one of my frustrations all along is that there are lots of workshops in early stage about raising finance, but actually one of the best ways of impressing an investment house or an angel investor that your stuff is to at least be prepared in this area and know what these things look like, because chances are an investment house or an angel, they've done it before, they know their stuff. So the times that people get caught out in this early stage by just not knowing what this stuff looks like is a bit scary at times. So yeah, they do change. The articles almost certainly will change. Different rounds of investment, for example. Shareholders at that point, for obvious reasons, will change as well. Duties, employment, health and safety, insurance, they just get more complex, taking on more people, more offices. If you're office based, it just gets more complex, hence why teams grow. Equally, the one thing that won't change is liability. If you resign, you can't, walking away isn't an answer if you've still done the wrong thing. So again, another reason why from early days, just know what you're there to do.
Okay, so I think my takeaways are play by the rules and don't give up. Yeah.
Yeah, be a good summary. But
cool. Okay, so we've not had any more questions just yet. So if you have got one burning, please do pop it in the chat right away. If we don't get those, then as you can see on your screen there, Clive's email at the bottom or Twitter handle, do get in touch with him if you're not sure what specifically you need to do for your business. Clive will be more than happy to advise on that. So thank you ever so much. I will give you a round of applause. I know it's a bit weird, isn't it, during this virtual time? It's kind of just a cutout. So thank you ever so much for that. Okay, so what we shall do now is I'm not going to share my screen because Royd, I'll just hand over to you for you to share yours. But what I'll do a quick introduction. So as I mentioned at the beginning, Royd is the co-founder of NewRedo software. They are based in our Bruntwood Leeds building, in our platform building. So it's really great to have you with us in our Birmingham community. A little bit about Royd. So after receiving a computer for Christmas in 1981, the impressive career followed. Royd spent a few years designing Sage's accounting software, and he's provided consultancy for the Lotus Formula One team. He was an agile pioneer in the public sector and now focuses on building top performing teams that deliver high quality software quickly and regularly, which is a really great bio to have, Royd. I'm sure you'll be happy to follow that. So if I invite you to share your screen, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Steph. I think there we go. Is that right? Can everybody see my slides? Okay. Yeah, well, first of all then, so thank you very much for inviting me along this evening. It's a lot sunnier actually up here in Yorkshire. The sun is shining. We had all the thunderstorms yesterday. So yeah, the weather must be moving south at the moment. It makes a change. So as Steph said, so I've spent a lot of time in the IT sector, all my career really, 30 odd years now. I've kind of done all sorts of things. I started off working on a big IBM mainframe, lived through the desktop era, the Jurassic desktop era, client server, all that stuff. and obviously now we're in the web and mobile time. A lot of things have changed in that time, and a lot of the ways that we work and think about software have changed in that time. I worked at Sage as an architect at Sage up in the Northeast for about 5 years, so I've got a bit of experience of shrink wrap software as well, and then kind of a whole load of clients through my sort of 10 years or so of contracting. And I don't know if Steph mentioned as well, so we part of what we do up in Leeds is organise a tech community called Agile Yorkshire, which has been around for about 10 years. We've had all sorts of great speakers there, people like Martin Fowler, yeah, all sorts of people. So, you know, hopefully what I'm going to talk about tonight really is you know, I've lived through lots of change as time's gone on, and listened to lots of wisdom of various over the years. Different people have shared and published, you know, about organizing teams and delivering software. We've had an inflection point just recently where while lots of people in the IT space did work from home sort of semi-regularly, quite a few did on a permanent basis, but now everybody's doing it. You know, you know, things may not be the same again. We don't really know. It's all what's going to unfold over the coming months, but I think it's useful to kind of have a little, you know, spend a bit of time thinking about you know, what that might mean to you as a business. So this whole working from home thing, as we know, it is kind of like it's the new normal. Everybody's doing it, everybody's learning. It's great for us, in fact. Well, I find it quite useful, just because lots of our clients and customers, some of them were always worked in a distributed way. I'm quite happy to use video conferencing tools and such like. However, now that everybody has had to at least have a go at that, it's you know, it's made things a lot more flexible. It's kind of trained up lots of people who are a little bit uncomfortable. You know, I read writing some notes for tonight that Zoom, I think, is now worth more than the 7 biggest airlines put together. So you know how times change. You know, many people like the way that working from home has impacted them personally. Not everybody does, obviously, but I know a lot of engineers and lots of product development people. It's you know, it provides an awful lot of flexibility. We're all familiar with you know, sitting in our pajamas, clearing our inbox, swapping your commute for watching Joe Wicks and doing 20 minutes exercise in the morning. If you're a business owner, as I know some of you, you know, quite a lot of you watching this now there's often costs that can be saved in all sorts of different ways. But you know, has anything else changed? Is the actual fundamental, you know, how the business operates, how is that gonna, you know, what is the impact on that? You know, as the weeks roll by, what should business leaders be watching out for? You know, and is there actually an opportunity that we can capitalize on? So, you know, one of the things that I see, you know, talked about a lot to me, you know, you can see it in social media and everything during this lockdown period, it's been, you know, very prevalent, is that as soon as there's any kind of change or new, you know, a new change in the circumstances for everybody, it's very common for the kind of people to start reflecting on the tools, and there are many tools that IT teams use, and there's kind of been a new set of tools that lockdown has brought to bear upon us. And you know, I've certainly used more. I knew there were a lot of video conferencing platforms around, but I've definitely used even more in the last few weeks. And lots of those tools, you know, there to help support the kind of the new communication styles of you know, that working in remote teams, working from home, working in a distributed fashion bring upon us. It's often tempting as a business to kind of, you know, start to try and sort of standardize on some of these things, and you know, sign up, create a company account with your favorite video conferencing platform, or new sort of virtual whiteboarding tools, or all sorts of things that might be now being used. But one of the things I see successful teams or successful organizations doing quite a lot of is especially in areas now, you know, where, you know, I think that the kind of working in this distributed fashion, even though it's kind of been around for a long time now, and there are some massively successful teams who've been doing this for a long time, in the large, it was still in the early days of ways, the right way to sort of, or ways to take advantage of it. So I always encourage people to be a little bit flexible about the kind of tools that teams use, to allow them room to innovate, to experiment. And certainly if you have multiple software teams or multiple product development teams, or just multiple teams in your business, then allowing them to do different things, or even encouraging them to do different things, and show acts of leadership around different styles of getting work done, allows you to run little experiments and compare what what might be best practice, what might work for your particular circumstances, because those circumstances are all different for everybody. Question: is it really necessary to see somebody on Slack from 9 a.m. in the morning to 5 o'clock at night? Do I need to see their presence in the same way that I might have done in an office? In some ways, kind of embracing the benefits that working from home the working from home bring, and also the differences, instead of trying to make distributed working like it was in the office. Sort of daily check-ins and things. Yes, it's often important to have, in product development teams, we're quite keen on some kind of daily huddle or stand-up meeting, it's often called. And yes, it's quite likely that might be important and a vital thing that you do, but it's not the only way to skin the cat. And there are there are other ways which have proven to work really well and can provide other opportunities, or really working in more of this asynchronous style can really unlock kind of new delivery potential. There's a company called 37 Signals, which I think that some people might be familiar with. They wrote a product called Basecamp, which has been really popular, been around for a long time now, and they've been proponents of this kind of stuff for a long time. I've got a link to, in the resources in my last slide, to a page on their website which describes how they do communication, and they're big proponents of encouraging this asynchronous style of communication and relying more on the written word and less on that kind of face-to-face, real-time communication that working in an office brings us. Co-located teams are something that agile delivery methodologies, which are very popular nowadays, talks about a lot and really encourages, and definitely this kind of high bandwidth real-time communication has an advantage. You can make really quick decisions. It allows things like pair programming, but thinking about how we can communicate asynchronously can also have advantages. And obviously time zones, once you're in the world of remote teams and a more distributed workforce, the people you can collaborate with and the kind of geographically, the people that you can work with expands massively. All of a sudden you're into the world of time zones, and then in many ways more of a literate culture can have some advantages. So I just ask you to question everything really in that respect. The next part, obviously, I'm just going to really gloss over this, but it's really tempting to, as a leader in this kind of distributed team environment, to feel a little bit out of control. It's very relaxing and comforting to look around the office and see everybody busy, but software development or product development as a trade, it's typically populated with really smart professional people, and they can absolutely be trusted, and this brings us back to that whole point about allowing them to experiment with what they do and how they work, and, you know, tracking what comes out of the system rather than what people might be, what they might be working on, or what, you know, how busy they might be at any point in time, and sort of encouraging acts of leadership and encouraging people to try new things is something that I always try to encourage people to experiment with. And then the last kind of point I wanted to, you know, to make here is, you know, hopefully to sort of introduce people who may not have been familiar with, you know, with this concept before, is this guy Mel Conway. Be mindful of Mel Conway. So who's Mel Conway? He was a computer scientist. He's still around now, but he wrote a paper back in the 60s, I think 67, called "How Do Committees Invent?" That paper was published and picked up by a guy called Fred Brooks, who wrote a book called The Mythical Man Month. Fred Brooks was an IBM project manager at the time. He wrote a book called The Mythical Man Month, and in it he cited Fred Brooks's paper and called it Conway's Law. That Mythical Man Month is a much, you know, it's quite a classic IT reference book. It's often very, you know, regularly cited, and in it he talks about, or coined this phrase, Conway's Law. Conway's Law says, you know, in any organization that designs a system, and in our case, obviously that's a software system, and it doesn't have to be a software system. Any organization that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's structure. So loosely speaking, that means however you organize your business, and how your teams work together will have a direct influence on what they produce. Distributed teams will absolutely produce different designs and different products to co-located teams. You know, if you have a department with 3 delivery teams, all working on a product, it's highly likely, and this has been proven in many studies that you can find on the web, it's highly likely that those 3 teams will produce a software product with loosely speaking 3 modules in it. So on one level, kind of, you know, distributed teams gives us a sort of the advantage of being able to reach out globally to, you know, expertise from different time zones, different geographical locations, and, you know, sometimes at advantageous competitive prices. But probably what's more important there than that is the ease and ability to create very diverse teams, and it's that diversity that can really be brought to bear upon what we produce, and have a very positive influence on it. Open source software typically organically optimizes itself for the way open source software grows. So it grows through contribution through all sorts of people who may be working on individual features in parallel. Not all that might be promoted to the mainline, the main code base. Some will fall by the wayside, some will survive, but that just the nature of how those organizations communicate has an implication on the kind of architecture and design that that's likely to emerge. And often that architecture is something that, from an engineering perspective, it's something we want to kind of take advantage of, depending on the context that we're in. Certain kind of structure and architecture definitely gives rise to being more nimble and easier to react to competitive pressure or changes in the economic climate, or you know, business practice at the time. You know, so just being mindful of how you organize, you know, the people working within your business, It's something that you can use to your advantage, use as a tool, depending on the kind of structure of what they're producing, how you'd like it to look. Yeah, so I think really that just brings me to my last slide. Really, I've got 3 resources here. One to Mel Conway's original paper, one to the Basecamp page on their communication style, which is just something to reflect on, and then this last link I've got just recently we ran an Agile Yorkshire event about distributed teams. Jutta Eckstein, who wrote probably the first book I ever read, probably 10 years ago, about distributed teams, talked, as well as Matt Skelton, who has recently written a book in the DevOps space around this topic. There's lots of, in that body of knowledge, there's lots of great things to reflect on, and I think that you can use to your advantage at the moment. Yeah, so please check that out, and check out any of those other Agile Yorkshire videos that are there on the NewRedo web YouTube channel. And I think that brings me to a close.
Awesome, thank you ever so much. And just a quick question on that, Agile Yorkshire. Is it a closed group, or is it something that some of our attendees could join in if they wanted to?
No, it's not a closed group by any stretch of the imagination. We all comers are welcome, really. So typically, it has to be said, it runs in a geographical location, or it has done for many years. But we are starting to change that, and obviously we've had to change that in the current climate. But it runs in and around Leeds at the moment, or it's run quite often in the platform building, Bruntwood's platform building, right above the station. So if you're in Leeds on any kind of business, you can check out any upcoming dates. But for many years now, we have videoed every episode, and we have had some fantastic speakers over the years. As I say, many published authors and regular conference speakers, including people like Marty Fowler. We've put quite a bit of effort into videoing those. All the videos are available online. Just check out the NewRedo YouTube channel. There's some fantastic presentations to watch there, some of which you'd have to pay good money to go and hear at a conference. So I'd definitely encourage you to do that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's always great to have some more resources. So thank you ever so much for sharing that. I will leave that YouTube link just on the screen whilst we go into the Q&A for people who want to jot that down or take a screen grab. So
sure.
Thank you ever so much for sharing that. I think it's really topical right now, and as you say, we've all had to adapt to it and learn it super quickly, whether we want to or not. So really great to hear your thoughts on that. We have 2 questions that have come through. So the first one is, I know some employees whose employers are being pretty rubbish at the remote working thing, as this was never an option before COVID. How can employees of these companies raise their voices to get the top level to listen to them?
Well, yeah, really good question. I mean, I think that I'm a great believer that success is hugely influential. I think that if, I've kind of lived through this whole transition in the IT sector between, the kind of traditional project delivery, methods of, kind of phased, what we used to call waterfall delivery, which was something that I worked within for many, many years. And, clearly it's possible to build successful or deliver successful projects using that approach. But I've kind of lived through the whole gradual transition to many organizations now adopting a more agile, incremental, or iterative, I should say, form of delivery with all sorts of ideas that have been transferred over from kind of lean manufacturing and other sectors which have tried to kind of optimize the way that they work. I've kind of now, as we've gone through that transition, I think that you know, there are always people you know, with a burning desire to be at the head of the pack there, but then you know, other parts of the space, other organizations who'd rather sort of take it a little bit more slowly. Now, one of the things that I see time and time again being really influential, and that's teams that are really successful at delivery. If you can prove and you can demonstrate that, you know, you're being effective, then you know, that brings a huge amount of influence, and over time it will you know, open all sorts of opportunities to work in different ways and try different things. So that's really what I would say. Strive to be successful. You know, and all else will follow, I think.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much. And then the other question that came in was just around the Agile Yorkshire and where they can watch that live stream. Presumably it's on that YouTube link.
It is, yes. I think that's a link to the last month's live stream video. But on that channel, there's probably, I think, about close to 100 videos, or certainly in the 70, 80, 90, I can't remember exactly now, but there's a lot of videos there, all sorts of different aspects. Some of them more technical, some of them more process based, some of them sort of team organization. There's even I think there's even some stuff about office space, actually. Somebody came and talked about space versus place at one point, which is really interesting. And so yeah.
Yeah, great. And that kind of leads on to another question that's just come in, actually. So a question from David is, how could organisations like Bruntwood offering co-working space help companies blend home and office working? So yeah, what are your thoughts on the combination of the two, really?
I think I do see this cropping up quite a lot, really, and certainly it's something that we've sort of reflected on quite a lot in just, you know, the way NewRedo operates. I think that because the kind of communication styles and the maybe communication patterns is a better phrase to use, can be quite different between all being co-located and working and communicating real time, compared to how that, you know, might need to take place with remote workers. It can be a bit tricky to mix the two. I think in an ideal situation, you'd kind of have everybody co-located or everybody working remotely. Obviously, that's a luxury that probably a few of us can rely on. But I think it's just important to be mindful of that. It's easy to overlook if the majority of people are remote. It's easy to overlook what might be going on, you know, in a co-located office, and vice versa. It's probably the more common one, where, you know, somebody is working in a remote, you know, working from home, and the rest of the team are in the office. It's pretty easy to kind of forget them and organize all sorts of things that they can't participate in, start working in ways that they find it difficult to contribute to. The only thing that really comes out of that is sort of increased cost or less, you know, reduced effectiveness. So being mindful of it is number one. I think in an ideal world, you're trying to do all of one or all of the other. Yeah,
perfect. I know personally, it's definitely helped during this time. You know, for me, we've had many a catch-up, social catch-up and work catch-ups with, you know, people who are working from home, the teams who are still manning the buildings, and also those colleagues who are on furlough. Like you say, making sure that they're still involved in those social conversations and just checking in on them and making sure that we're all still as one team, which is really important. So we have got one more question, and I know we are quite strapped for time, so I'm just going to ask you this, if you can quickly summarise for me, Roy. What are the main dangers of eliminating co-location if an office is looking at this? Face-to-face meetings and chats over coffees and lunch are invaluable in many organisations.
I think definitely I mean, it's a huge, it's a change, isn't it? It's definitely a change in style. And I think that it probably, it absolutely will take time for organizations to reorientate themselves or reorganize themselves to operate effectively. But, there are businesses out there who have been amazingly successful. And, I mentioned Basecamp, but, WordPress, a third of the world's websites I think currently run on WordPress. WordPress is all a remote team. They they do everything asynchronously. All the communication is asynchronous. I think that lots of those, and those are just two famous ones. There are all sorts of other businesses. I think that there are some great resources online to, and you can find great resources online of people sharing what they've tried and what they haven't tried. I think that it's for me, it's all about embracing what it means, and you could look at it as a kind of a hindrance and be a bit pessimistic about it, but if we were locked down for the next 5 years, heaven forbid, there would be businesses that would thrive through that, and they would be the businesses that took a sideways look at it, really reflected on what they did and what their purpose was, and how they could best best still be effective, given that it's a design constraint at the end of the day, is it not? There's the constraints of operation are changed, and but they will still they will still go on, and people will still succeed with those constraints. So it's a design challenge in some ways. It's all about being creative.
Perfect. Well, on that note, I am going to thank you ever so much for your thoughts. I did see in the chat there Stephanie, who is also based in platform building, offering to meet up for a coffee when you get a chance to return. They're based on the 2nd floor, so really great to connect you both, even though you're in the same building, but
yes.
The virtual world has mysterious ways. So thank you ever so much, Roy. It's really great to hear from you. I'm just going to quickly move on.
Okay.
So I did say at the beginning, let me share my screen once more with you all, just to make you aware of a couple of things that are going on during the next couple of days and weeks. So if you have not yet heard, this week at Innovation Birmingham campus, we have launched a brand new accelerator program. So we're working closely together with the HS2 and the Connected Places Catapult. This brand new accelerator program is live now, ready for applications. So they're looking for 10 SME companies to drive innovation in the design and build, employ new technologies and techniques to improve productivity, innovate to do more with less, and also to create fewer emissions and noise. So if you think that your company could help with with some of those challenges that we're currently facing, there's 3 challenges which we are particularly looking at, and they are circular economy, green corridor, and productivity. So if you think your company falls in that, please do visit the Innovation Birmingham website link there at the bottom of the screen and apply for that. It's a 4-month program. You'll get access to business support from obviously both Brentwood SciTech team and also HS2 and the Catapult teams. And again, just access to knowledge, events going on, much more. If you do want any more information on that, my email address is on the last slide. Please do feel free to get in touch with me if you want some more information on that, or if you can't find that on the website. Really good opportunity. So the next one I just want to highlight is this event, which is happening on next Tuesday, so Tuesday the 23rd of June. I've popped the link at the top of the screen, so please do again take a look at that. So the UK Tech Cluster Group are popping together a full day event, so it's 9:15 all the way through to 5 p.m. Don't worry, you don't have to commit to the whole thing. You can drop in and out throughout the day. So there's going to be workshops, panel sessions, keynote talks from a high caliber of speakers located all across the UK. So lots of Midlands, Manchester, Scotland, Oxford speakers, all with great knowledge. And we've also secured the DCMS Secretary of State, Oliver Bawden. So really, really good one to note there. And as I say, you don't need to commit to the whole 9 to 5. You can just pop in and out. You just need to pop to the website and then register your interest. It is an invite-only event, so please do use that link just at the top of the screen. And I'll also pop it in the chat at the end for anybody who would like the link direct. And then just to quickly move on once more, Code Your Future. So for anybody who was at our January Tech Wednesday, we heard from Claire, who spoke to us a bit about this Code Your Future program that was just kicking off in Birmingham. And I'm going to invite Edgar to speak a bit more on this because he's just dropped me a note to say that it's coming up in Birmingham and he just wants to let you all know a bit more information. So Edgar, hopefully you will now be able to unmute yourself and share any information.
Hi, hello everybody. Thank you for having me here. Basically, my name is Edgar. I'm a recent volunteer for Code Your Future in the Birmingham sector. Given with the COVID situation now, we've kind of branched out outside of just Birmingham itself. And what we're looking for is both students and volunteers. So we are going on to class 2 at the moment. The class 2 is going to start after selection periods are over at about the 6th of July. So if you guys know anybody that would be interested in joining Code Your Future as a student, more than welcome to join us. Another thing that we're looking for as well is people who would like to volunteer their time. It could be tech related, but also non-tech related. So myself being, I volunteer as a PD or personal development buddy with some of these students. And I also help out with the organization's outreach as an ambassador. If you guys would like to do that, the contact information is on the link here. So codeyourfuture.io. More than welcome to join us there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much. And it's really great to have that update from you, Edgar, which was kind of fell into my inbox just yesterday like a ray of sunshine. So
well, thank you for giving us the opportunity.
No problem. And I love your virtual background in the Golden Gate Bridge there. You're really getting into this. So perfect. Okie doke. So that is all from me that I need to share with you. We did just about get in. It's 6:30 exactly, so I don't want to keep you too much more of your evening, but as I mentioned, my email address is just there on your screen for you if you want to get in touch with me about the HS2 Accelerator, if you need any information about any future events coming up. I've just seen the chat's quite active, so a couple of people dropping in links there as well. So please do, communicate with each other, collaborate, whilst we can't meet up for this coffee in real life. I thank you ever so much for joining me. And once more, thank you to Clive and to Royd for sharing your knowledge with us this evening. I think that's all. If anybody, as I say, do want to carry on chatting away in the chat box, please feel free. But other than that, I wish you all a very, very enjoyable evening and we'll see you next time. Thank you ever so much.